There's a saying amongst DC real estate attorneys that in Washington, D.C., the highest form of tenancy is a squatter. And for that reason, buying an investment property in Washington, D.C. is a very bad idea. The professional squatter is not only going to not pay rent, they're not going to behave themselves. They're going to destroy your property. They're going to drive out your paying tenants that are good tenants because they know that, or they're looking for, a healthy settlement. They know how painful the legal process is to get rid of them. And by the way, this is independent of the COVID, federal eviction ban. If you're willing to pay the squatter to leave, you can call an attorney and they will draft up what's called a cash for keys contract. You should never just hand that squatter cash and have them leave and you take their word for it, because without a signed contract signed in front of a notary, they're going to come back and you're going to do this again. By the way, even though the settling is going to be perhaps a little cheaper than going through the legal process of evicting them, think in terms of not paying them hundreds but paying them thousands. Again, but if you wanted to do that, you can hire an attorney to draw up a cash for keys contract, have them sign it in front of a notary, and then pay them whatever the amount is that you agree on, and then you can get rid of them. Now, if you decide to go the eviction route, just be mentally prepared to, in addition to the money that you're going to spend, to be spending a lot of time on this, because you and your counsel are going to be up against three entities. One is the Washington, D.C. Office of Tenant Advocacy. And I'll repeat that, the DC Office of Tenant Advocacy. Feel free to peruse their website to learn a little bit more about what they do. The second is the George Washington University Law School. Again, feel free to peruse their site and they'll state what they do for tenants. And the third is the Right to Housing Initiative in Washington, D.C. So again, they all have an online presence, and you can see how they're going to be working together against you. Make sure you don't do anything that could possibly be misinterpreted as tenant harassment. For example, if they decide in the middle of winter when it's freezing to leave all the doors open and run up the heat because they like the breeze but they don't want to be cold, you've got to pay that $400 or $500 electric bill. You cannot cut off the utilities. Ask me how I know this. If they decide to destroy things because they have had a bad day and you've got to fix it, if you decide that you want to move in there to keep an eye on things, or even move a friend of yours in there to get a handle on that situation, you can't do that because that could possibly be misinterpreted as tenant harassment. And you do not want this going to a jury. You didn't win the lottery, you don't have a rich uncle, you've worked hard all your life, you've made sacrifices, you've made good decisions to be in this position where you can purchase a property. And now you've got a parasite in your house that wants to be rewarded for bad behavior. Given the makeup of Washington, D.C., of mostly younger people who are tenants, so a randomly selected jury will have mostly younger people who are tenants. Do you trust that they have the experience to see this situation for what it is, or could they be snowed by a sob story of the evil privileged property owner who's trying to kick out a poor tenant who's down on their luck? You have not done any form of self-help, and so the squatter's legal team can't bring this in front of a jury. So what they're going to do is they're going to delay it. They're going to make up a reason to delay the information in front of a judge. And they're going to keep delaying it until the judge finally says, you know what, that's it. We can't delay this anymore. I need to see the evidence and make a decision. Well, they know that when they delay it, A, the squatter gets a place to squat in for free, and B, you're more likely to settle or pay them to leave, because they know that the squatters, driving out your paying tenants, destroying your property, and running up your bills. Once that judge sees the evidence, it issues the judgment that squatter has to leave, then the squatter's legal team is going to appeal it, and they're going to keep doing it for the same reasons, to give them more time, the squatter more time, until they run out of appeals. Then there's going to be a military search that takes a little bit of time to make sure that squatter is not in the military and they're actually there. They're not going to just knock on the door and say, okay, hey, you're there. You have to make sure that person's not in the military and stationed elsewhere. Once that happens, that comes back clear, then you basically have to coordinate 3 entities: the U.S. Marshals, a locksmith, and an eviction crew. It has to be a professionally licensed eviction crew in Washington, D.C. You can't just have a couple buddies go in there and haul their stuff out of there. Now, the eviction crew is typically booked out in advance because there's a number of these situations going on in D.C. It's a squatter's paradise. The locksmith is fairly easy to do. All this has to be coordinated within a 2-hour window, those 3 parties. The U.S. Marshals, that's the calendar that's the most difficult to get on. So by the time you get on all 3 calendars simultaneously, it could be several weeks out. Point being, soup to nuts, start to finish, when you initiate this legal process to the day that that lock is changed officially and the marshals sign off and that squatter's out of your property, I would mentally prepare for that process to take about 9 months. And for that reason, it is a bad idea to buy an investment property in Washington, D.C.